90s.
No, I think it was later. It probably had to be around 2001, 2002.
Oh, was that late?
Yeah.
I guess I was still there when they were planning it. I was there.
I mean, there was
99.
probably a long time, but I think it was probably 2002.
Well, then
I was in the new role. I was in my role of corporate responsibility. I didn't get a chance. It had to be after 2000.
I think I was there for the decision then, in the announcement. And Costa Rica was really proud because they chose big education was a big part of it.
Absolutely.
Civil safety was huge.
I'm still friends with people down there that I still Facebook friends and communicate back and forth. But I went down there. One of the times I was down there, I was doing a CSR class or do a CSR version in my business.
Do you remember which professor?
I could probably dig it up.
I was just curious.
Good looking guy. Probably a little taller than me, dark hair.
Who wrote the college? I was just there over the holiday. We didn't go through in Kai, but got to visit Costa Rica, another fabulous place.
There's actually some, we did like a English write-up in whatever the journal was about corporate response. I don't know what we actually call it.
Oh, the Kai Journal. Later I'll tell you. Sometime I worked on a network of young business leaders for sustainable development, funded by Stefan Schmidt on his first project before the
for one day.
See, that was even more than trial plus just teaching.
It was. Oh, the people. Yeah. So should be canonized presently. You up? Okay.
Hello?
Good afternoon. Hello and welcome to the Erb C-Suite Speaker Series. I am Terry Neladov, Managing Director of the Erb Institute. Erb is the business sustainability partnership between the Ross School of Business and the School of Environment and Sustainability. And we focus on helping to prepare business students to be business leaders for sustainability. And we do that through research, teaching, both in the class and through extracurricular workshops like today's, as well as direct interaction with business leaders like Dave. And our C-Suite Speaker Series each year brings a senior business sustainability leader to campus, either from a corporation or from a nonprofit, to share his or her experience in actually doing sustainability in large, complex global organizations. And today we're delighted to welcome as our 2018 C-Suite speaker, Dave Stangis, who is Chief Sustainability Officer for Campbell Soup. Dave recently wrote a book, which some of you may have seen, the 21st Century Corporate Citizenship Executive Guide, and he'll refer to it a little bit today in his comments. I wanted to seed the discussion with one quote that I found very interesting from the book. And he comments that for the up-and-coming manager, this book is a crib sheet to the 21st century MBA that you can't get yet in business schools. And so I take issue with that because I think that's exactly what we're trying to bring
Thanks, Jim. That's great.
to the Ross Business School and our partner school, C's. And I'll ask Jerry Davis, our Associate Dean for Business and Impact, to perhaps respond to some of those questions around business and impact. Thank you.
Yes, welcome to the State of the Union address.
Yeah.
Very excited to have Dave Stangis here. So I'm the Associate Dean for Business Plus Impact at the Ross School. It's a job I've had for 7 months now, and I'm still figuring out what it is, but it's basically trying to make sure that the Ross School could be the world's most progressive source of business solutions to the problems of our generation, which is a big, hairy thing that Scott has set out. We're trying to figure out how to do it. And one way we figure that out is to have business leaders that can explain to us how they did it. I'm super excited to welcome Dave Stangis back to campus today. Dave is a Michigan MBA, served on the board of the Graham Sustainability Institute, and as Chief Sustainability Officer at Campbell's, Dave designs the company's CSR and sustainability strategies and programming, including those around responsible sourcing, sustainable agriculture, and operational sustainability. He's helped the company achieve recognition as one of the world's most ethical companies, certified, as well as a place on the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices and the 100 Best Corporate Citizens list. Dave's dedication to doing things the right things the right way has attracted some attention. In 2008 and 2013, he was named one of the 100 most influential people in business ethics by Ethisphere magazine, alongside Pope Francis and some other people that scored lower. Trust Across America named him one of the top 100 thought leaders in trustworthy business behavior for 4 years in a row. And last year, he didn't just publish one book, but 2, which those of us that write books for a living, we feel really bad that he can do this in his spare time and write 2 books, like the 21st Century Corporate Citizenship book and the Executive's Guide to 21st Century Corporate Citizenship. Book's arguments about business sustainability align closely with the Erb Institute's theory about enterprise integration. Over the next hour, Dave is going to be sharing his thinking on both enterprise integration and the next step in sustainability, market transformation, she's referring to as Sustainability 3.0. So please join me in welcoming Dave Stangis.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be back on campus. I promise I'm not going to talk straight to you for an hour. I'm going to do a little sprint through a little bit of background, a little bit of sprint through what I see happening in sustainability. Probably try to share what I'm seeing in the agricultural food sector, and maybe kind of finish up with where some of this might be going. I spent 12 years. Well, first we'll start. How many people are born and raised here in Michigan? Okay. So then you all know when I say I was born here, right? And I vacationed here, right? So I was born here, lived here for almost 30 years. Then I moved out to Arizona, but went to my undergrad at the University of Detroit. I got a master's degree in occupational environmental health from Wayne State, and then did my MBA at Michigan. The latter degrees were kind of part-time at night while I was working full-time. That little building on the bottom right is over on First Street, just past First and Ann. That was my first job. That's where I met my wife. It was thermoanalytical, or ERG, if you're way back when, an environmental lab here in Ann Arbor. The top left is University of Detroit's campus. Basically blue-collar kind of education, right? I mean, working early on. My first internship was between my sophomore and junior year at Ford Motor Company, and in Dearborn at something called the Stationary Source Environmental Control Office, abbreviated SECO, that obviously focused on things that didn't move, stationary, right? In contrast to mobile source. Did things like sampling smokestacks, closing sludge lagoons, did some old asbestos abatement work when I was here in Ann Arbor at a consulting firm, but basically kind of core environmental health and safety. When I left to go to Arizona, I was actually going to go to law school at Wayne State because I thought that was fun to do. That would have taken 5 years part-time, but I got really tired of the weather, the cold and the cloudiness that came. So I moved to Arizona, worked for Arizona Public Service Company, which is now Pinnacle West. When the electric utility went through deregulation, got to spend a lot of time at the largest nuclear power plant in the free world, Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station, bottom right and kind of right-hand middle. And I was the only industrial hygienist at that site. And part of my job was to go into containment whenever they did a refueling. If anybody's familiar with that business, they would refuel, take out the fuel rods, put new fuel rods in. I got to go in at midnight on my own, in containment, in full SCBA to make sure it was safe. Like if I came out alive, then they could go in and do the work. And it was scary. I mean, it was a great experience, but it was a little scary. Went to Intel, spent 12 years at Intel. I've worked at that company longer than any other company. That's the company that I created this function around corporate responsibility. I started as a safety engineer, and the world kind of changed and evolved, and I'm happy to talk about any of these sectors and any of these stories in the Q&A. And Campbell hired me in 2008, basically to do the same thing. The first vice president of corporate social responsibility, set up a program. We're seeing this happen in our sector. We're getting shareholder resolutions around reporting, metrics, and data, and we need a business strategy. Doug Conant was the CEO. Some of you may have seen Doug or heard him run around. Now he's still on the board of Avon. They've gone through
challenges the last few years. He's also involved in CECP. It used to be called the Council Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy, and now they've just gone back to the acronym. Denise Morrison is now the CEO of Campbell. I work directly with her. That transition was 2011. And at Campbell, had a lot of experience in starting up the program, also managing the foundation and community affairs for a little while, and now really focused on what I'll talk to a little bit later, helping the company deliver on its purpose of real food, sustainable agriculture and responsible sourcing. A lot of people know Campbell. I taught a class Monday morning at a high school in Dearborn, AP Environmental Science for an old friend of mine. And none of the students knew that we made anything other than soup in red and white cans. Right? They just didn't know. And it's part of the way we communicate as branded companies. But Campbell is Pace in the Campbell part of the business, Pace, Prego, V8, Swanson. We also have Pepperidge Farm and everything that comes with Pepperidge Farm, bread, goldfish crackers, frozen bakery. We've made some acquisitions in the last few years. We also have Arnott's, so if you're familiar with Australia and Tim Tams, that's us as well. And Kelsen, anybody that loves the blue tins of Danish butter cookies, Royal Dansk or Kelsen, that's us as well. Bolthouse Farms we purchased at the time was our largest acquisition. Basically, there's only two major carrot growers in the U.S. One of them is us now. The other is Grimway Farms. So we're in agriculture. We're vertical again in agriculture. What else is up there? We've got a couple of B Corps up here. I'll talk about those a little later. Garden Fresh Gourmet, which might be a hometown favorite to some of you here. That's us as well now. That sits in our Sea Fresh division. And a couple weeks ago, we closed on Pacific Foods, great company based in Oregon, plant-based drinks, plant-based soups and beverages. And we recently announced, but haven't closed, on our largest acquisition to date, Snyder's Lance, which is Snyder's of Hanover pretzels and Cape Cod kettle chips and a bunch of other brands in there. So that's the only commercial I'm going to give you, right? That's the end of the Campbell commercial. There's a little bit later on strategy, but I just wanted you to have some context. So I have 3 slides where I want to talk about what we've seen, and you think about these as a maturity model, right? Don't think about these as you got to be everything on one slide. You can't be all over the board. Good companies can't be in 1, 2, or 3. But sustainability started when I started. There wasn't a sustainability degree. There wasn't a sustainability student network. We were just either focused on traditional MBA. We were focused on environment, health, and safety. But what you'll see when this all started out is companies doing environmental reporting, maybe being responsible for their footprint. Really a big focus on do less harm, pollute less, harm less people, make safer product. It's the era of responsible care. This is kind of the era of also when 14001, the management system, came out around environmental health and safety. Pollution prevention hierarchy. A lot of big companies talked about moving from disposal to recycle to reuse. Beyond compliance was something that everybody talked about. We're better because we go beyond compliance. We strive to be beyond compliance. And the philanthropy and community affairs was really focused on big causes. So partnerships with large, well-known nonprofits that might have had an environmental angle, maybe a hunger angle. These things still exist. They're all good, but this is where people moved from just kind of doing operations to trying to move into what I call Sustainability 1.0. Sustainability 2.0 is where a lot of companies are today. Probably the most that are focusing on this. This is a good place to be. Lots of opportunity, lots of strength coming on here. This is full bottom line, right? People, planet, profit. We've all heard that. It's great. I mean, John Elkington's been a kind of a guiding star for me for decades now and coined the term a long, long time ago. And this is the era, and there's still a few. Like this is an actual picture on the right of a CSR sustainability report published in this era, right? So this is when we all had the little globe, right, and the picture, or the kids, and they all had their hands on the globe, right? I'm sorry, I know it sounds funny, but that's the era, and this is There's still a lot of great work going on in this space. This is when sustainability starts to get respected. CEOs look at it, they have conversations, maybe they're even talking a little bit about it now. They declare they want to lead on sustainability. There's template programs, right? So every single company has an environmental program. They have a workplace program, and they have a community program, right? This was the era, and it's still the era, sometimes in sectors where you could read a sustainability report or go to a website, and if you didn't see the company's name, you really couldn't tell what company that was, right? Because the programs were template. Everybody had a program, employee, community, and environment. A lot of effort on, what's our footprint? How much do we use? How much do we need to offset? How do we measure kind of the actual metrics? A ton of effort on really getting an assessment of where we're at. And this is competitive. We're focused on now trying to, who's better, right? Who's got the best performance? Who's a little bit better? Who's moving faster than the other companies in sustainability? And sustainability, I'm talking here in the broadest term. So if you're looking at this from a Latin American perspective or a European perspective, think about it in those terms. Could be the company's role in society, not just environmental sustainability. And a big movement on standardization within the sector. So things like the Global Reporting Initiative, things like investor surveys, publicly traded companies, questions we were getting were driving sector standardization, and that was a good thing. We actually strived to make our reports and make our data and make our communications comparable, right, so that you could compare a food company to a food company, and even cross-sector. Right? So this is kind of where I would say most people are today, most big companies, including most of the leading companies. Again, this is a maturity model where you're cutting across. Where I think this is headed and where a lot of companies are really trying to make some differentiation here is what I call 3.0, Sustainability 3.0. And this is where it moves from a template to being something that is differentiated, not just for the company, but in the sector. This is where we differentiate not on what we do, but how we do it. Right? There's a lot of pre-competitive language that we talk about in sustainability. We don't want to hide and control our knowledge. We want to share it. But we want to differentiate. We actually want to win in this space. Circular economy, design thinking, anticipatory, foresight work. What's next? What's future? What can my company do better than anybody else? A lot of language on net positive. Moving beyond like I'm going to offset how much water I use or I'm going to offset how much carbon I use. How can I actually create a positive benefit in society doing what I do best? Here you can't just succeed within your own sector. You actually need cross-sector partnerships. You need partnerships that are outside of your company. You need partnerships that might be outside of your expertise. And this is where the planetary and context metrics come into play, right? Science-based metrics, water-based metrics on aquifer or watershed, metrics in my community, among the people that I work with, among my customer or consumer base. How can I drive change with them, and how can I talk about it? And this is what leads to differentiation in storytelling, right? Not everybody, very few people are here, and even the ones that are here, if you peel back the onion, you're going to find half of them still in Sustainability 2.0, right? So, but this is what's happening, and this is where it's going, and I think this will accelerate. Consumers are getting more sophisticated. They're smarter. They know how to judge. They're making purchase decisions in this space. And customers, the B2B world is starting to learn here. One of the things that one of my most proudest moments at Intel before I left was getting that tagline. It's hard to read because it's right on that seam. But those of you that are younger won't remember, but those of you that might be older, you may remember that Intel was basically a consumer brand. I mean, it was clearly a B2B, but people made purchase decisions on Intel. There were Pentium processors. We had bunny people that danced. They did commercials. They would go into the clean rooms. But we had this great big brainstorming session about what's next. And it switched. This was 2000. This annual report came out. We designed this phrase in 2008, and it came out. This is the cover of the annual report in May of 2009. And we tried to trademark the thing and everything. But remember talking about it's not what we make. It's not just what we make. It's what we make possible. And if you take a look at, if you go back and do a case study of Intel and their corporate narrative and look at that point in time, that's when they went from being the chip company and bunny people to the sponsors of tomorrow, right? And talked about not what we make, not just what we make, but what we make possible. And what we're trying to do at Campbell is similar in talking about what we can do as Campbell. We're small compared to some of the food companies. We're smaller than General Mills. We're smaller than Kellogg's. We're a fraction the size of Unilever or Nestle. But what can we do differently than everybody else? So I'm going to try to tell you what I'm trying to do a little bit at Campbell in this space and then try to talk a little bit about the future. So this is our purpose. Company's purpose, it sounds like, that's great, 7 words. That's kind of nice. Took us 6 months. We locked people up in rooms. We did all this strategy stuff. We had fights and all, good constructive dialogue. We went through the whole product portfolio. We had people from Australia. I was on the team. We had marketing people, communications people, people from some of our mission brands. And we shopped the portfolio. We lined up all the products one day along the wall and went over and shopped which ones are real food. Went over to buy the ones, bring them back, and you could see what was left. There's a gap between what's real food and what we make today, and that was the tension in the system. This is 2014. We could not get past this at that time. Every time we tried to go a little beyond what real food means, pieces would start to pull away. We needed everybody on board. Over the next 2 years, it didn't happen overnight, but R&D went off to define what real food meant for them. Product development went off to define what real food meant for them. Legal went off to define what real food meant for them. Took us a couple years, but we launched a real food philosophy. These things are on the website. There's narratives behind them, but this is basically the design criteria, so now everybody understands. So our company's built on founders, right? There's a founder for Campbell Soup and Pepperidge Farm. There's a founder for Plum Organics, a founder for Bolthouse Farms. Ingredients, we have an archive. We can go back and see what the company was founded on. Ingredients that we're proud to serve, our own family. Ingredients that everybody recognizes. And ingredients that, and food products that are accessible and available to all. That was the purpose of the company when it was founded 150 years ago. We had to go back and find that. And that's what you're seeing in companies. You hear all this work on purpose. It's like, what is our purpose? Not what is our goal, not what's our mission, what's our vision. Why are we in business? And we went and found that. We defined what real food is, grown or raised with care from animals or plants. It's not secret. It's not chemicals. It's not, that's the goal. Get back to real food. Responsibly sourced, sustainably produced, transparent, and accessible to all. One thing Campbell can do that a lot of other companies can't is try to bring this real food to market in a way that everybody can have access to. And it's informed some of our brand, informed some of what we do. Clearly, these things are aspirational, but we've declared we want to be the leader in the food sector in trust, and more recently, we've declared we want to be the leader in the food sector in health and well-being. And these things are now driving different metrics. It's not perfect yet. You can you can almost think about it. How could we tighten it more? How could we make Campbell different than other people? We want to differentiate on this work. This is a framework for how we insert sustainability into every part of the business we can. I talk about sustainability 1 and 2 and 3. My goal really is never to even use the S word in the company, right? It's how can we use the things we talk about when we define and talk about sustainability as ways to drive the core business. Take risk out of the supply chain, build a more resilient supply chain, get better products to market, get better nutrition to market, leave the planet healthier, in a healthier source, healthier soils, better nutrition, better food. Grown, sourced, produced, and then shared. We just presented this again today. We're kind of rolling this new framework out. It's not a new strategy. It's a new strategic framework so that everybody in the company can understand when we come to meet with them why we're meeting with them, why we're trying to advance their agenda, not ours, why we're trying to make the company better, not just convince them to be sustainable. This plays out in a bunch of different places. I talk to students. I talk to professionals that are trying to move into the sector. It plays out in how you do public policy. It plays out in how you engage in your community. Had a great conversation with some of our colleagues last week about trying to start new public policy. You're going to go to Washington and advocate on certain principles, but you have to do it in a way that's authentic to everything else you're doing. We launched what'sinmyfood.com, talked about things that maybe don't make us that comfortable. We're not proud of everything that's in our food yet. right? But if we're transparent, it causes us discomfort and gives us tension to change and reformulate and keep working on it. Several pages on how we're trying to be transparent and how we're trying to communicate. Took us a long time to deal with BPA and the can lining. It took us a long time to get to the point of being the first and only company to label GMOs on our product labels. It took us a while to be the first company to decide that maybe being in the trade association wasn't the best match for what we were trying to deliver to the marketplace. And you have to talk about things you may not want to talk about, right? I mean, the thing about the difference between Sustainability 2.0, one really good signal, if you're trying to judge a company, between 2.0 and 3.0, is they're talking about things they may not want to talk about. Almost everybody in 2.0, the story's good news. Always good news. When you see companies in 3.0, or when you know they're at least wading into that space, you're starting to hear things they might be uncomfortable, right? They're talking about challenges. They're talking about things they might have missed. It's a great signal. We just launched a campaign called Uncanned a couple weeks ago. Basically, it's mobile optimized, so you're not going to see it on TV. You'll see it on Facebook if you're on Facebook. Podcasts with real farmers. Really, the reason it's called Uncanned, and it's completely open, transparent about what's in my food on the Campbell brand. It's all agriculture. It's all traceability. It's all transparency. It's all sourcing. The other thing I think you're going to see is more in this space. We have 2 public benefit corporations in Campbell, 2 B Corps. Plum we bought as a B Corp. How many people are like, yeah, I know what a B Corp is? Okay. I won't go all the way through all the B Corp stuff. We bought Plum as a B Corp, and on day one, they didn't tell us when we bought them. They kind of sprung it on us. They wanted to be the first company to be incorporated as a public benefit corporation in Delaware on day one, August 1st. So we had a little bit of communicating. Nobody in Campbell, very few people in Campbell knew what a B Corp was at the time. None of them knew what a public benefit corporation was at the time, but it worked out great. We talked to my boss at the time, great, one of the smartest people in the company, the general counsel, trying to convince her that this is okay, you know, that we're going to be the first company to have a public benefit corporation within the company, and gave her all the data, and she wrote back, you know, despite the fact that there's no case law, and despite the fact that you could get sued for doing this, or you could get sued for doing that, I think it's okay. Go ahead, we'll see what happens. And it's worked out great. Plum is doing really good work. Their mission program is called The Full Effect. It's really about getting the best food to everybody, you know, all the little people that need the best food, so it's accessible to everybody in equal state. And I was talking to them the other day about public policy. And when you're thinking about public policy, you need to stick with what the purpose is. If your mission is to get the best food available to the youngest population so everybody has it, that should inform your public policy as well. That should inform your lobbying if you have it. The other thing we did a couple years ago now, some of you may have seen this, is we launched an internal startup called the Soulful Project. An amazing startup. I mean, these people basically split off from Campbell inside the company, created a public benefit corporation, eventually became a B Corp. Buy one, give one model for local nonprofit food banks. So it's local. It doesn't go everywhere. The story doesn't translate. Wegmans was a great partner with this and let us run with it. Megan Shea and Chip Heim are the kind of 2 people inside the company that are running it, and they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, these people just are all in as a startup. And we just announced new national distribution. Everybody loves the story. They like the product, but they love the story, right? And that's what's happening. People that are buying Plum like the product, but they trust the story. They trust the compassion behind it. And that's where you're going to see more and more of this. And other companies, when we turned Plum into a PBC, we were the only company. Only U.S. publicly traded company with a public benefit corporation. Now there's more. Now we're the only company that I'm aware of with 2 benefit corps underneath, U.S. publicly traded, but there will be more. They keep coming. Okay, that's it for Campbell. Now I'm going to transition to what what we're seeing in the future, and how this is starting to play out. Some of these slides, there are references down at the bottom so you can see where they come from. I'm going to try to get through this a little quicker. The retail environment is just completely disrupted, right? It's hard to imagine what's going to happen in the retail environment, but people in the future are going to be making purchases from everywhere. The home is going to be the place where people do most of their buying. For some of us, that's already the case, right? Your car. I mean, it's amazing to me to listen to some of the stuff coming back to Detroit. I'm a car guy. I always was a car guy. I can't, like, unplug myself. But you're just going to be shopping, living, buying in your car as well. Just think about how many have Alexa at home or something like Alexa at home? No, not too many. Just think when your car is, everything you think of, you just mention it in your car, and all of a sudden it shows up at your house. Right? I mean, it sounds that's kind of funny, but I'm telling you, within 18 months, that will be the case. Maybe 2 years, because it takes a car company. But everywhere that you can think about today, wouldn't it be nice if I could shop here and have it appear there? Done. It's coming, right? So everything that we sell to stores, all of that's being disrupted. Right? Amazon Go last week, right? Maybe a week ago now. Walk in the store with your phone app, throw everything in your thing, walk out the store, you're done. Right? You don't pay, there's nobody there. A few stories in the New York Times about, this seems sterile, and I don't know if it's so fresh, but those are people that are 50 years old writing those stories, right? That like to talk to people when they go shopping. People that walk around all day with their head in their phone don't care. They're just going to get their food, and this is the future. Maybe it's not Amazon, but I guarantee that this is where the retail environment is going, if you actually want to go to a place. This slide got a little messed up, but there's a lot of conversation, a lot of things going on in the technology space, right? And one word that gets thrown around a lot is blockchain. Nothing wrong with blockchain. Blockchain has some characteristics, right? It's shared, it's decentralized, it's secure, it's trusted, and it's automated. It's a general, it's a distributed ledger. Most people have read a little bit about blockchain now. I don't want to give everybody a blockchain 101. But basically, it's a network that brings in trust and authenticity. The network decides if transactions are legitimate and authentic. And the network tracks it, and once the network decides that transaction's good, it's written to the blockchain. So it stands on its own today, fairly secure, right? Although 500 billion of crypto coin just got stolen last week, and everybody's bowing over in South Korea or wherever it's at. So it's not completely secure, but much more secure than, say, something on my desktop, something on the cloud. If my desktop goes down or the cloud goes down, the blockchain is standard. It's great for authenticating things, right? If I want to make sure that that diamond that I'm paying all that money for is that diamond from that place, blockchain is a great thing to do, right? One of the things, these slides, sorry about the slides. Somehow these got a little bit messed up. There's a couple quotes in here, though, about what blockchain is, the end-all, be-all, savior to everything, or blockchain is a term like Kleenex, right? It's just a general term that we're using to describe a new kind of platform. And my premise in this space is a lot of people are using blockchain as a description of digitization and tracking of the system, right? And if we can track information across the system everywhere, it allows us to do this transparency, traceability, authenticity. Blockchain can touch everything in the supply chain, but not everything can be blockchain. So there's a couple things that get mixed up here. This is published by Gartner, and the funny thing about it, or the interesting thing about it, you can see where blockchain is, right? It's just right on the line between inflated expectations and disillusionment. But last year, the 2016 slide, you can actually go online and look at. It's way on the other side. It's on the other side of the peak. So it's really moved, right? We've done a blockchain pilot at Campbell around chicken, right? So poultry, and looked at what it would take to build it into the system, what the benefits would be, how much the cost, and how much effort. We're doing some more partnerships. A lot of companies are looking at blockchain for food safety, right? Like instantaneous recall, which I know everywhere it is. If there's an issue, Walmart's doing some partnerships, IBM's involved, companies like Accenture. There's a lot of work going on. But what I've seen so far is people are still searching for, there's still a gap between what I want to do and what blockchain really offers. But it's coming. There's whole companies focused on just the blockchain of food, right? Every day in the paper, you can kind of flip through the Wall Street Journal or flip through some of the tech journals, and there's new headlines. And because it's trusted. It takes out a third party, right? That's the main thing about blockchain is it eliminates somebody else saying that's a legitimate transaction. It does it on its own. That's where the benefit comes from. So there's all kinds of startups. We meet with them all the time. We bring in a lot of ideas. You still have to digitize everything. It doesn't happen on its own. It still has to connect every single transaction. So whether you do it in a traditional kind of technology platform or blockchain, it's there. They're trying to do it for nonprofits, right? They're trying to do it for, climate change. I just read another new startup. It's a really interesting space, but I guess what I would like to say is think about blockchain as one person's point of view. Think about it as a platform to trace and track and authenticate. Because if you think about just blockchain, it gets a little, it's not as applicable as you think it might be. It's a little bit more challenging than I thought. But you can see it's just all over the place, and especially in food because of the complex supply chain. As companies are struggling in this space to figure out how fast things are going, what do I need to invest in, we've all launched venture capital arms, right? As well as all of the little small branded companies now are really expensive to purchase. And the market, everybody wants to buy organic, real food companies. We've all started to look, and you can see the timeline across the bottom. Acre is Campbell's venture arm, $125 million a few years given to an independent arm focused on making investments at the intersection of sustainability, technology, and health, and agriculture. Sustainability, technology, and agriculture. Really doing some interesting work, and some of their investments are public, some aren't so public. Big efforts around food waste, agricultural technology. What I want you to think about, though, is not just the food sector. Think about this, what I'm describing, this disruption in how I deal with a customer, the disruption of how a consumer comes to me, the disruption of how I interact in the marketplace, what technology is bringing. You can apply it to automotive. You can apply it to hospitality. You can apply it to apparel. Right? The disruptions I'm showing you are happening in every single sector. And this is where companies are starting to compete in Sustainability 3.0. These are some of the startups. And those boxes across the top, if you're a sustainability student or a business student, or you're both as part of Erb, those boxes are where the opportunities are. Right? Alternative proteins. Everybody. Every food company. Every new R&D. Every new startup. Food waste has gone from being not on the radar at all to being one of the biggest things that we're working on in our sector right now. Farm productivity, this is all the data stuff. Really fascinating. If you've got an interest in life sciences, or you've got an angle towards biology and chemistry, you start looking at the right-hand side of that chart for ideas, for companies, for technology, for startups, things you want to bring. The thing I was talking to Terry about, the people in, maybe not everybody in this room, but the people that are in this mix between sustainability and business have a whole different skill set that most people coming out of business or sustainability don't have. And you guys can compete. The people coming out of this school, the people coming out of these programs have a set of skills that frankly put you above most of your competition. I mean, we've met with several of those. I can't say which companies we've met with. We've met several of those companies, just talked to them about how it applies, how it would work in our supply chain, what our suppliers might think of it. Think about this as an ecosystem of almost any sector, right? This happens to be the food sector. And think about it as just the most technical person you can be and just dissect every single transaction, right? This is where the companies are starting. Smart irrigation, all over the place. Every one of these buckets up here is enabled by what's happening in technology or science, right? Those are the things that are driving this innovation. Animal data, next generation farms, farm management software, precision agriculture. Just amazing things happening from spending their time of the last 100 years above the soil and working on plants and fertilizer and pesticides, now to looking at plant microbiomes, stressing the microbiome, having gene expression come out in the plant from nutrition, pest resistance, disease resistance, sensors, robotics. I mean, almost every day you see a news story about robotic agriculture where people don't need to be there anymore. Optics, robots are able to go like pick out the weeds that we can't even see with our eyesight, and they're doing it automated. It's amazing to watch. You've seen this thing before, right? This is CRISPR-Cas9. right? So that's the DNA and the messenger RNA, splitting the DNA, bringing in the life science world, we talked a little bit about what's going to be disrupting the ag world. This is amazing work. This is going to bring, it's happening in plants. There's already companies on the planet, publicly traded companies, doing this work in plants. There's already companies publicly traded on the market doing this work in people. Immunotherapy is this. The ethical implications, what's right, what's wrong. When do you do a germline that then is passed on to every generation after that? When do you just do cells that are not? Will disrupt, and the evolution of this will disrupt the life science spectrum, just like all that technology will disrupt the ag spectrum. And you put these two things together, is a gene-edited plant or animal a GMO? Is it real? If you just edit and fix a piece of DNA in a plant, is it still a plant? Will you buy it? Will you not buy it? How about lab-grown meat? Is that meat? If I take a cell and grow meat and make a hamburger for you, is that real food? These are the kind of things we're challenged with now. And these are the places where companies are going to, and this is what I think this moment in time, if you're willing to be a student of the future and take the time to study the things you want to study, not what I'm telling you to study. I'm a science geek. I'm a technology geek. I like to learn things. These are some of the books I read the last couple years, or the last 12 months, 12 to 16 months. And every one of these books that I've read is like, aha, like every 10 pages, it's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, right? The Seventh Sense is all about the power of networks. And the fact that, Facebook and Amazon will never have true competition because of the size of the network. It doesn't matter if Snapchat comes up with something better. Facebook just gets to copy it because they're bigger. I never even thought of it until I read some of this stuff. The Inevitable is great. It's got all kinds of little one-liners in the technology space. Cracking Creation is all about how it's a great kind of drama almost of the competition of who patented the CRISPR-Cas9 technology. But I think my point, I'll leave you kind of here, right, with a little bit of insight into what's happening in the food sector, where I see this going, where I really see the opportunity for people coming into the business today to find opportunity, not just for them, to find the new jobs, to start the new businesses, to change their companies. This is where the opportunity is. And some of the ways that we've tried to future-proof Campbell is push ourselves hard and look forward. And you can see some of the things that we've identified here that are coming and going to disrupt Campbell in a positive way, positive disruption, and we need to be prepared for. Not just next year's strat plan or strategic plan. What do we need to do in the future? The connected kitchen, everything that appliances are going to be smart appliances, right? The reason people get frustrated with cars now is they buy a car in 2 years, they need to update the operating system, right? I mean, the cars get out of date too quick. Your refrigerator and stove are coming, right? People are not going to want to buy them anymore. They're going to want to lease them because they're going to need a new one in 2 years. What is that? How do you do? If you're Whirlpool, right, or Best Buy, how does that change your business model? Limitless local disruption. I mean, we need to be able to manufacture food where the crops are grown. Right now, we ship it around, manufacture it. What does that mean for the business? Personalized nutrition. Nobody eats meals. Not nobody. Very few people eat meals anymore. They kind of snack throughout the day. What does that mean for food? These are the things that are going on in every sector. Leading companies are pushing themselves. They're doing scenario planning, trying to be successful in all these future scenarios. Sorry about the slide formatting. A couple things I want to, this is my last slide, that will go just to answer questions, anybody that has questions on anything. A sustainable enterprise, I believe, can be a for-profit company, can also be a nonprofit, can be an agency. What I've tried to define here is kind of my point of view on any of these to be sustainable. And by sustainable, I mean around forever. They reach a point of sustainability. Hard to read the first bullet, but they have to have excellent operational management. They need to be well managed and execute well. Plus, they have to have accurate predictive intelligence. They have to be able to predict the future. accurately. You can predict the future and be wrong. That doesn't count. Right? You have to be excellent operational, predict the future and be right, base those in science and technology, and invest in the long term without sacrificing the near term. One of the biggest challenges in for-profit companies is this battle between investments, resource allocation, short-term and long-term. And you have to deliver, create more value than you use. If you do those things, by definition, you are a sustainable enterprise, in my premise, right? I think if you think about those things and you look at where those things are maybe not happening, those are places to work on. Talk a little bit about this in the last night at dinner. This new model where this is going, where you see companies starting to drive these things, as we talk a little bit about it. My company, you name it, your company, does something better than it's unique core competencies. That's why it's a company. That's why it's in business. There's a social challenge out there to be solved, right? I mean, the reason companies come into being is they want to help solve a problem that people are willing to pay for or an agency is willing to go into. Core competency, a unique problem to be solved. If I'm a for-profit company, if I can monetize it, that's where I want to go. That's where I want to invest. That's what I want to work on. Everybody wins. Everybody shares in the profit. Everybody shares in the upside. If I'm an agency, I want to be able to measure it. Or a nonprofit person, but agency. That's where people are making their investments. That's where they're differentiating. That's where I think the future of this is going, based on all that kind of other stuff. But I think if you watch technology, really watch it, you can really you think you might be going to work for. And I don't care where they're in. I'll stop there. Went a little bit longer than quarter two, but happy to answer any questions.
So we have time for questions. Let me just ask, when we planned this, we weren't sure if there were a class or another event coming up at 6. Do people have another event immediately after this at 6 o'clock? Great. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A.
We won't be offended if you have to leave at 6. I won't be offended. He may be offended.
Oh, you can't leave at 6. So
oh, I have something at 6. Oh, sorry.
And here's an extra mic for...
Right here in front.
Actually, yeah, let's go right to questions. I'm sure there will be a lot of them.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you. I don't know if everybody else can.
So super interesting technological advancements in food, how technology is going to play into our food. So curious from your standpoint how that balances with consumers' fear of technology in food, and how labeling, specifically when it comes to GMO, how you can kind of educate consumers on what that means and how you strike that balance in a sustainable way.
Yeah, it's not a solved question, right? I told this story either this morning or last night at dinner. Every year for many, many years, innovation in food was a good thing, right? Companies would innovate. They'd throw more products on the market. It didn't matter if they were crazy colors or if it was plastic fruit that you could stretch out. It didn't matter. In 2012, that stopped. The Edelman Trust Barometer asked people questions about this, and in 2012, innovation in food got to be scary. Right now, things like CRISPR-Cas9, things like gene editing are going to unlock a lot of opportunity. Whether consumers are going to be willing to embrace them, I don't know. I think one of the things that we have to do, I mean, you can almost play out the scenarios in the past, right? You can look at the GMO and the companies that participated in that marketplace, and you can see what they might have done differently if they were able to go back in time. We should learn from some of these things. I think that the more we talk about it, and some of the reasons that we kind of struggled about how soon we go out on BPA, how soon we put genetically modified ingredients, I've spent a lot of time in crisis management over my couple careers, and once you get to the point about, now I'm trying to convince you that it's safe, I've already lost that argument. You need to decide based on information that you choose. I can help share it, and I can help listen to your concerns and bring them back, but we can make a lot of mistakes as an industry, but we're right at the cusp. I mean, with all of these mergers and acquisitions, Dow, DuPont, Monsanto, Bayer, Syngenta, there's a lot of things we can do right and wrong. And I think I know there are people in the marketplace that are going to try to sneak things into the marketplace, and because they can. A gene-edited product today is not considered a GMO by FDA. Do you consider? I mean, we could make this a long kind of back and forth, but I think that's part of the challenge, right? A consumer gets to decide right now. So the consumers don't trust big food. They don't always trust the government. Scientists are sometimes not trusted either. So it's tough. But I think if transparency and being completely open about what we're trying to do, let's say I'm trying to use a really novel technology to bring a new food to market. I should say it. I should be wide open, talk about it, let people choose based on what I'm trying to do. The other thing is real food is a driver for almost everybody now. So we're trying to get to the point where it's real and people believe it's real. Not just Campbell, I mean the entire sector.
Okay, first here and then in the back.
Thank you. How do you cascade your vision at Campbell's or at your company throughout the supply chain? And as an example, you were talking about the difference between sustainability 2.0 and 3.0 in the discussions with your general counsel and the whole transparency and whatnot. That can, of course, take years and is very difficult within your own company. So how can you, what's the best way to kind of help engage your supply chain and lead them in that way?
It's an important question, especially for students and people that are trying to drive change in their company. The best way to do it is in their language, not mine, right? So, and I don't care if I do care. I mean, the point is if it's a legal colleague I'm talking to, it's trying to understand what is it they're concerned about, helping them understand what I'm trying to drive, not just getting to a binary answer. Yes, you can do that. No, you can't do that. It's like, how can we work together to make sure I satisfy your concerns as a lawyer in the legal realm, but how can I advance not the sustainability agenda, but the company strategy? How can I make the company better? Same thing with supply chain, manufacturing, procurement, finance. How can we make better financial decisions? How can we have better data to make investments that are, we've actually done the work on them so we're more confident in their payback versus we think it's going to be. We hope it works this way. We hope the payback is 3 years and not 5 years. It's all in their language. And I think that's again, goes back to the benefit of having business and sustainability, because when you're talking to business people, you're not going to be talking about, don't talk about sustainability. Talk about business. If you're talking to sustainability people, you can talk about sustainability. But I think that having that language and those tools are really going to help you.
So we had a question right there.
Hi. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on the relationship between big food companies like Campbell and urban farming initiatives, kind of like there's like the Michigan Urban Farming Initiative in Detroit, and in the future how that'll play?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that we've done a lot of experimentation through our community affairs and our foundation work. Our headquarters is in Camden. That's basically a laboratory for us. And we've also done some urban farming partnerships here well, not here in Ann Arbor, but here in Detroit through Garden Fresh Gourmet. When I kind of blew by that foresight slide where I had those 8 different future trends. One was limitless local. Another one was biodiverse ingredients. Another one was clean ag tech and purposeful regeneration. These are all things that play out in the future of food. And if you're trying to make food accessible to everybody, available everywhere, minimize shipping and transportation, optimize freshness and accessibility, urban farming, covered agriculture, all come into play, right? The part of it is some of the experience we've done in the past have not gone through all the way to fruition because farming is hard work. A lot of times we'll help people plant urban farms and then that's it, they're done. That was nice. I don't have the time or I don't want to do the work. But clearly urban farming is a future food source. I also think kind of compartmentalized farming. Once we're able to design soil, climate, temperature, expression, microbiome in a module, we're doing some partnerships and looking at some startups in this space, why you couldn't take that module and take it anywhere in the world to grow the best food and feed the people that need it most, beyond not urban farming, but more kind of compartmentalized transported farming.
You talked about in Sustainability 3.0 using the sustainability perspective to drive the corporate strategy. How do you do the same with like the corporate metrics? Or I guess how is that strategy like manifested in the corporate metrics?
No, it's a great question. I mean, the part of what I try to oversee in the company, I don't do all the work, it's just one person, but we have work streams on real food, right? Taking out artificials, bringing in positives, taking a look at what is happening in the product portfolio. Real work on transparency, how we communicate, traceability, what we're doing in the supply chain, and a bunch of work on sustainability as well. Reducing resource use, finding new ways to come to market, sustainable agriculture partnerships, finding ways to make working with our growers for it to win for them, make them more efficient, more productive. We have metrics for all three of those in our incentive compensation program as part of the comp committee review every quarter. One of the meetings I had today and yesterday was to review those because we're on a fiscal year that doesn't fit the calendar year. And you got to drive those. Every company has, and every agency and every nonprofit has levers to drive change. And incentive, communications, behavior, those are all tools. So we try to see as many of those, we try to activate as many of those as we can. From, hiring, recruitment, new employee orientation, training, objective setting, to recognition and compensation.
So you talked about how you were able to start the sustainability practice in Intel and how you were also able to kind of lead it in Campbell's. And I think in this room where people are all kind of thinking about both business and sustainability, I think there's kind of a wide range of where people go in their careers, both where they've been and where they're trying to go. And so what advice and what do you have for people that are going to corporations that, well, they might not be totally against sustainability, they might not have the most robust, focus on it. What advice do you have for people that would like to, either start a practice or just try to get more awareness within their company?
It's changed over time. My advice today is to go where you feel like you can have an impact in what you feel you do best, right? If you're an operations person, or you're a supply chain person, or you're an accounting person, or a finance person, sustainability is good. There's nothing wrong with trying to find a sustainability entryway. But if you find a company that you've been looking at, you've been studying, you've been listening to the narrative, you've maybe got on a couple earnings calls, you feel like they're trying to drive a mission or a purpose, you can see what they're doing, you're out on their website, maybe you know a couple people that work there, any job in that company you can find a way into sustainability. Every single discipline now. We talked a little bit about it. Jobs posted at purpose, mission-driven companies, doesn't matter what they are. All of the people in our packaging department, the people in we have groups doing startup product development stuff. We have nutrition people working on what I would call sustainability. I don't tell them it's sustainability. We're just trying to help advance that agenda. But almost anywhere, finance, we have opportunity. I think finance is a big place in the future. HR is a huge untapped opportunity to help drive this in companies. So my advice is really to go where you feel like you can get in. Don't just take any job. Go for a company, an agency, an enterprise where you feel there's something there. And then when you're there, you can pretty much, I can't guarantee it, but if you work hard and you do your job really well, you can find a way in.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
My question is not related to the food industry.
Good.
So it's really interesting to see the progression from Sustainability 1, 2, and 3, the way you outlined it. And in your 3.0 slide, you had systems thinking. Mm-hmm. Then you followed that up with blockchain. And the concept of blockchain is very much dependent on a community thinking to encourage your supply chain to provide information to you that they're unwilling to or are scared to. Mm-hmm. So if you kind of go out of the food industry and go into manufacturing, electronics, automotive, apparel, for instance, how do you drive your supply chain, or how do you message, provide messaging to your supply chain to encourage data disclosure? Because that's what it comes down to, and that's the biggest challenge in the industry or in cross-industry?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few strategies you can go at this. I mean, if you're interested in trying to digitize, which is kind of the blockchain approach, or basically the broad digitization piece, then it's really recording transactions. It's as simple as that. That's not driving behavior change so much, is what you're getting at, right? The other piece is what we're trying to do, and what I see this happen in a bunch of different sectors, is to make this a competitive topic, right? To recognize good performance, help poor performers, make it public, fold sustainability or responsibility in the supply chain into decisions around purchasing. Give it a score. When you're doing put it in the RFI, put it in the RFP. Ask the question when you do when they come in and present. Give them a template, right? These all will drive behavior change. They'll drive self-selection. They'll drive self-performance. It doesn't happen overnight, but we put in responsible sourcing standards, responsible growing standards, and we've had suppliers in the past come to us and say, "We do this stuff. We love this stuff. Why won't you?" In the past, before, they want to be recognized on it. There's always going to be pockets of concern, right? And those are the ones you have to have the conversation, right? We're happy to help you, put you on a corrective action plan, share learnings, move you along. You don't want to just fire everybody that can't perform well at the beginning. But I think if you think about it from a change management perspective and a performance management perspective, you can move them along.
Thank you.
Let's see, 2 more questions first here and then.
So it depends, right? You're right. They weren't on that slide. We actually have an index in our report that we're publishing in February, like a GRI index or like a UN Global Compact index. I have had conversations with investor groups in the U.S. and Europe that will be asking us to report and disclose our performance and behavior and commitments to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We've got public commitments around 12.3 in food waste. But for the most part, what I'm seeing in the U.S., I can tell you, and this is also for Campbell, it's not driving new behavior. Food waste is the one example, I would say, where a big global initiative came around 12.3. It also coincided with the attention around food waste, and there's alignment around there. Right now, it's a little bit of this kind of translation exercise that we're having with investors and reporters and consumers and business schools, too, around the topic. It's different than the Millennium Development Goals, but I think it's also a great, like if I were, let's say I showed up at Campbell today. Let's say they hired me today, and they weren't doing anything yet, or they were doing good work and they had work in the community. I would not hesitate to use the SDGs as a filter to map out a materiality assessment, ask different people what we should be invested in. But I don't see it changing a lot of strategy or behavior today in U.S. companies. It's a little bit different in Europe and outside of those two continents, but that's kind of what I see today. It would have been it would have been a little disingenuous for me to put up a slide and say we're doing all this work based on the SDGs.
So I was just wondering more whether it's a driver of going from Sustainability 2.0 to Sustainability 3.0.
I don't think so. Yeah, not for me. So, that's not that it's right or wrong, but yeah, not for me.
Thank you for your presentation today. First, I want to pick up on where the gentleman back here asked about urban farming. One of the things that we see in the work that I do is that urban farming is a way of providing jobs for people.
Right.
So the question is, for a local, vibrant economy, and the thing I like to think about is the head of lettuce that's got frequent flyer miles, right? So when you look at that, you look at the transportation, you look at the economics of it, it's hard to go from a local urban farm to a mid-scale farm that's actually a business,
right,
because the economics are very difficult. Can you comment on how Campbell's looks at that with the limitless, I forget exactly the term.
Limitless local, yeah.
Yeah, if you could just help me understand how this movement in the local agriculture is really, part of it's about providing jobs and work for people, right? A local economy.
Yeah, I think the best way for me to try to describe it so you could visualize it is to think about this coming from two directions, right? So one, think about it as a company that's trying to make its supply chain and manufacturing system more nimble, more agile, right? Breaking up distribution systems, maybe breaking up production, trying to scatter it around where crops are grown, be able to do production where things are ripe and where we have people and the seasons are right, and maybe we're making products that are seasonal for a certain market. So vision a big food company coming in this way. Then also envision what's happening in local agriculture, urban agriculture, new startup brands trying to rely on food waste and loss as product input, and wanting to be able to tell the story about jobs, social justice, environmental justice. So there's some brands in this space. We have people doing work here, and we have people doing work here. They haven't met yet. They're closer and closer every day, right, in terms of tapping into that network to bring a product to life, to bring a product to the marketplace that's economical, that tells a great story, that serves the local needs, but also serves the needs of the company that it's part of right now. It's coming. There's no doubt about it. I have no doubt that they will get there, but they're not there yet. But they're much closer than they were. And we're investing different kind of resources and effort in both of those places. Capital investments over here, and product development, community affairs, innovation ideas over here. I don't know if that helps, but that's what, I mean, that's kind of how it's happening. I have no doubt. No, I have no doubt they can. I've seen models. Part of it is even geographically. Like, I've looked at models of circular design, design thinking, perennial crops with, you know, animals, cover crops, everything that is producing a sustainable amount of food for a narrow population in a geography. And I've talked to them about what does it take to multiply that? What does it take to scale that? So that's how close the conversations are. And there's groups out there that are buying conventional farms, converting them into organic farms, turning them over to young farmers. These groups today are looking, they still need investment. They still need some philanthropy to make that work, but it's not always going to be that way. We're getting closer and closer. Yes. Yeah.
I'm dying to ask a question,
Okay.
and I think it may be the last one. But I think you have a couple of minutes before you have to take off right after, maybe for individual comments. But on your slides, you started off with the business case on how do you make the business case for sustainability, like you make a marketing case or an investment case or a new product case. But then later on, you mentioned business as a force for good, I think under Plum Organics. When do you use the business case, and when do you do something simply because it's the right thing to do?
You might not want to hear the answer, right? You always use the business case. You always use the business case. In some cases, the business case is the right thing to do. And for Plum and Soulful, that brand promise, and I'm not saying that they're always in conflict, right? I'm just saying the reason it works for Plum, and maybe the reason it works for Campbell, is because the consumer understands it. It's in the sweet spot of those three circles that I drew, right? It solves a social purpose. It's something we do uniquely well, and people will pay for it. If you do just two, and people don't pay for it, it's not a sustainable business. And I know that might sound crude. I'm not trying to be, I mean, I'm a science and sustainability guy, but what I've found in my tenure in companies is I get a lot more traction focusing on the business. I talk to Plum all the time. These people are passionate, right? I mean, we bought them as a little startup, and they just want to do all of these great things, and they're great things, but they try to convince people on the merit, like the moral merit. And I tell them, I said, I get it. I absolutely get it. But what you're trying to describe is that's your brand. You're doing it because your consumers expect that of your brand. You think I get it, you're taking a position on public policy, but that's because your brand reflects that you should take that position on public policy. So don't try to convince somebody in public policy it's the right position to take. Tell them it's the right thing for your brand. So there's a lot of overlap, and there's more and more overlap, and I'm not trying to be like, black and white on the thing, but I think that when you can convince people that it is doing the right thing is actually better for your business, that's where you want to be, right? That's the winning space. If I'm trying to tell somebody that it's the right thing to do, but it's going to cost you a little bit more, that's tough to do in a publicly traded company, especially if you hit challenging times in the marketplace. Sorry.
These are exactly the questions that we talk about every day at the
Okay.
Erb Institute. Thank you very much for coming to share your
That was great.
experience.
Thank you.